Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to wait another minute or two for everyone to join in and to be let into the room. So thanks again for those who are coming. We're just going to wait a minute or two to make sure there's no one else before we start, and then we'll move forward. I know it takes a little while to get everyone in the Zoom room or in the webinar. Okay, it looks like we're kind of holding steady at our numbers right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started tonight, and then we will, obviously, it's going to be recorded, so there's going to be more opportunities. So I want to welcome everyone to the virtual forum about the Madison Public Schools December 12th bond referendum. I'm the Board of Education President, Ms. Fisher, and I'm here to kind of kick things off. With me is the Board of Education member and Operations Committee Chair, Ms. Yowzy. So I'm going to hand it over to her to start us off.
Thanks so much, Ms. Fisher. On behalf of the Board of Education, thank you all for being here tonight. I've lived in Madison for almost 19 years, and I'm proud to have raised my children here. I'm excited to see the enthusiasm for the December 12th bond referendum. Tonight's an opportunity to hear directly from our district's advisors, the board, and our administration. These experts will discuss what the bond proposal could mean for the future of our school and our community. Now I'll turn it back to Sarah to get us started.
Thanks, Pam. I'll be your moderator tonight. And before our panelists share their expertise on the bond referendum and answer your questions, I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So there will be plenty of time for questions after our presentation for those who want to learn more. Please type your questions into the Zoom chat box. Your questions will be directed to an appropriate panelist, and we'll get to as many questions as we can before ending around 8:30 p.m. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with a response by email, as we have been on all the emails we've been getting throughout this process. We'll also be incorporating questions that we have received via email into the forum this evening. And it's important to note that this session is being recorded and will be posted on our bond referendum website for anyone who wants to watch it at a later time. You can also refer those who are not able to attend this evening to that recording. The site is madisonpublicsschools.org/vote. And speaking of the bond referendum website, it is an excellent source for information about the December 12th referendum. The website has frequently asked questions, an overview of the projects, voting information, and a lot more. Dr. Johanna Roberto is our interim superintendent, and she's going to start things off by talking about what led to this district what led the district to this point. Dr. Roberto.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher, for inviting me to the forum. I'm sure you're all aware of what a formal bond referendum is. It's a time when the school district asks the community to support a project that will enable the district to sell bonds to financially support it. This isn't something that is done over time. The financial strategy is very similar to that of a homeowner, an individual who would like to do home improvements and takes a loan out. This is something respectful to the community, because as an administrator, we're always respectful to the financial support the citizens of the community offered to the school. This didn't start yesterday. This referendum has been discussed by the administrative team for quite a while. In January of 2022, the independent demographic study illustrated that moving forward, the facility utilization would definitely benefit, because the demographic study showed that it would also maintain for the population that has stayed current. They also asked for community input. That's very, very important because each citizen of the community is able to, through their comments, show what they value in their community. And I have to tell you, as your current superintendent, the people that are on this panel did respect all the items that were brought forth. As we keep going, there's no secret that these buildings have issue. On just one Thursday night, I received 2 texts, one for a heat vent on a school that cannot be repaired because they can't find parts. That's how old it is. Another was for a backed up sewer pipe, which fell, and it backed up into common areas that our students need. We all remember September. People say, why do children need air conditioning? Well, I, for one, feel children do need air conditioning because it keeps the environment calm and safe for children. We don't know how all of us will react. And don't forget our staff members. A lot of energy is put out in the classroom, maintaining our children. This isn't just for one grade or one school. All schools will benefit. The district used the results from this demographic and facility utilization study, and they also worked with our district architects. These are very talented and respectful professionals in their field. And from that process, they identified the primary needs of the school with fiscal responsibility. But remember, it's not just fiscal responsibility. The goal is to get our facilities to a certain point, not beyond that. You have to remember that the state has offered to subsidize this bond. That's like you going for a home improvement loan and then somebody giving you points so that you could travel in the summer. Well, we're not going to travel in the summer because we'll have air conditioning. You could expand your summer programs. You're a perfect district for a summer happening for children, a place where children go, look at their school as something center of their life. Emergency repairs are very expensive. I signed the PO last week for the heat vent. In addition to that, it compromises the space for our children. Fiscal responsibility is important. If this referendum is passed, we will realize almost $30 million in state money. Okay, so as a citizen of New Jersey, we're contributing to that. But don't forget, Madison's getting it back. That's almost a third. I figured it out on my 99-cent calculator. I think that's about 34%. It's important that our schools are used daily. Rec is in the building. People utilize our schools. Over the summer, we had an overnight group there. And just so that you're not surprised, I am looking at policy because I think you should be charging some fees. But don't worry, Rec, you will never pay a fee. Our buildings are used almost over 300 hours. But now I'd like to talk to you as not your superintendent, but as just a citizen. I don't live in Madison, but oh my gosh, it is the most beautiful town. Every time I go to a school, I take an extra loop around a block just to see what these houses are like, the history of your town. But the one thing that's on my desk at all times is the district's mission statement. And maybe it's my age, but I think it was really the way I was raised. I was raised to show the value my parents showed me in every action I did. So this action is for them. Look at your town. You value. Do our schools represent the values of this fine community? Do they send the same message to our children that they can urinate in a bathroom that doesn't have rust? Does a teacher have to teach in a hall or in a room where the ceilings are falling? You're not going to like those comments I just made, but I've embraced Madison. I've embraced my children, and I'm not telling you how to vote. That wouldn't be appropriate. But I am telling you this will inspire and challenge students to be lifelong learners. The junior school is 100 years old. When I walked in it, it showed the value of Madison in 1924. Well, when we walk in our buildings in 100 years, will our buildings show the value you as citizens have shown to our children and community? We just monitor the facilities. The facilities belong to Madison. Take care of your homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roberto. When voters head to the polls on December 12th and fill out their mail-in ballots in advance, which I've heard some people have already done, and thank you for that, they'll see 3 questions on the ballot. Here to explain what projects are included in each of those questions is our district's architects, Anthony and Matthew Gianfricardo. There you go.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Gianfricardo. I'm with Gianfricardo Architects and Engineers. My father, Anthony, is here tonight with us as well. Question 1 in the referendum focuses on the highest priority items with regard to health and safety, as well as heating and ventilation throughout the district, and lastly, accessibility as well. Just to name a few categories, as far as safety and security, within the referendum, we're proposing upgrades to the fire alarms in each school, as well as public address and safety. Today, fire alarms don't simply sound off an alarm in the event of a fire. There's actually what is known as mass notification. And what that is, if there's a fire drill or God forbid a fire, the students and staff will hear across the fire alarm, there's a fire in the building, please evacuate. Which in another scenario, they may hear there is an intruder in the building, we are now in lockdown. That is actually on new systems being installed, actually now a code requirement, mass notification. Also within question 1 is heating and ventilation throughout all the classrooms in the district. We can't say enough how important providing heat to the students and staff is. Electrical upgrades are also in question 1. That is going to be a prerequisite to some of the upgrades you'll hear about in question 2. ADA accessibility upgrades are also in question 1, specifically at the high school, Kings Road, and the junior school, improving ADA accessibility and introducing accessibility in a few areas where it's actually lacking. Lastly, in question 1, we are proposing interior renovations to create more welcoming learning environments for the students and staff in areas that are in need of it. For example, you'll see here on the slide is a current picture of one of the hallway wings in the high school. Alongside of it is a rendering of what we are proposing. You'll see new lighting and floors, as well as a new ADA accessible ramp, which will grant more accessibility above and beyond a chairlift that requires annual maintenance. One anecdotal story I would like to share, as you know, with regards to question 1. Last year, the day of the Tori J holiday music concert, we received a phone call from the director of facilities within the district that there was no heat in the multi-purpose room at Tori J. There are 2 rooftop units that provide heating and ventilation to that space, and neither of them were working. So we went over to the school, and fortunately, the director of facilities and his staff were able to work to find a solution. They were able to take some parts from one of the units and put them into the other, and they were able to provide heat to the space and and hold the concert. But I'm not exaggerating when I say that that concert was mere hours from being canceled. So that's just one anecdotal story I'd like to share.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I think it's important to recognize that our buildings and grounds have been doing an amazing job, Mr. Ashman specifically. But even he has taken to saying no more Band-Aids. We are going to be $25,000 to death at this point because we keep having these small projects and they always seem to make it work. And so it might not seem like there's an issue there because we managed to keep going because they're doing great work. But then it gets harder and harder every time. So that's really helpful for us to get that larger picture. Here to give us some more insight about what's happening in the schools and the areas where the projects could make real improvements is Dave Dreschel, our principal at Madison High School.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. As the principal of the high school, and I've been in the district now this is my 7th year. I spend a great deal of time walking the hallways and visiting classrooms. I see firsthand every day how the inconsistent temperatures and dated facilities at school impacts our students and our fellow staff members. The updates and improvements, they just can't wait any longer. If you buzz in to the front door of our building and you enter the main lobby on a very rainy day, and it has to be a lot of rain, but it's been a rainy fall. Most of our fall, we've had garbage cans throughout our building, one being in the main lobby, and on average, we probably have 6 to 8 garbage cans around the building catching water from our roof. These garbage cans are in the main lobby, they're in hallways. We also have to put some in classrooms and offices to go ahead and catch the water from the roof. Once you get into our main lobby, you can either go ahead and typically take a right to head to the office, or a lot of people end up taking a left to go down to the gymnasium. For what many people believe is just a 1-story building, you actually walk in, and the first thing that you're met with, whether you walk right or whether you walk left, is a small flight of stairs. Both of those stairways also contain wheelchair lifts, lifts for people with disabilities, or even for our custodial staff to go ahead and have to carry around heavy equipment up and down a flight of steps. We have a total of 5 wheelchair lifts. Our students with disabilities, our staff with disabilities, in order to go ahead and go from the cafeteria or auditorium, which is in the main lobby of our building, in order to go to where the main classes of our school are in C hallway, where math, science, and a number of world languages and history classes are, any student or staff member with those challenges has to take a minimum of 2 wheelchair lifts to get to that location. And for those of you that were with me at the tour back in November, and anybody that's willing to go ahead and join next week on Wednesday, I'll be happy to go ahead and ride those wheelchair lifts for you. Those wheelchair lifts on average take about 2 to 3 minutes to go ahead and get down a total of 5 steps. So our students with disabilities, they end up having to leave their classes early, and they end up having to arrive at their classes typically late, just because of the accessibility that we have here with the wheelchair lifts. The wheelchair lifts most of the time don't even work, to no fault of anybody in buildings and grounds, but because of the amount that we're using them, they just end up, being broken quite a bit. I feel we have a service or a maintenance man out to service our equipment probably on average every 2 weeks. The one lift outside my office has been broken for pretty much the first part of this whole entire school year. And the other lift that is to the left off of the main lobby was just newly installed that the district put $90,000 towards. And that one has had to be maintained a number of times as well, causing any student or staff member with disabilities to not even be able to get from our main lobby down into the other parts of our building. There's been a number of times this year where I've had to stare, students or people in the face that have challenges of getting up and down our stairs and apologize for the conditions of these. And to go ahead and have to look at a student in the face with a disability that prevents them from being able to get up and down our steps and say, I'm sorry, and have to have them change their schedule in order to go ahead and make sure that they can get where they need to and not be able to access certain parts of our building is just, it's not a good excuse anymore. And it's not something that should stand here in this district. In addition to the accessibility issues that we have a fire alarm system that has been faulty for the 7 years since I've been here in the district. Central Avenue School had to close school for a day last year because the fire alarm system failed. At the high school, we have an issue with our smoke detector heads. They all can't be replaced at one time because of all the asbestos that is in the ceiling. So instead, we have to wait until the fire alarm system tells us that we have a faulty head, and we call the fire alarm company to come and replace those heads one at a time. But guess what happens when the fire alarm detector tells us that they're faulty? We get a consistent beeping that occurs in the hallway. Up until this year, for the past 6 years, I've had to move classrooms out of C hallway in order to go ahead and get removed from the beeping that occurs constantly until those heads are replaced. 2 classrooms in particular, C16 and C17, are classrooms that I've had to relocate in order to make sure that they have a classroom environment that doesn't have an incessant beeping over and over and over again. You walk down D hall into our science classrooms, and a lot of great stuff happens in those classrooms. A lot of great stuff happens outside of those classrooms in the courtyard. Well, why would they happen in the courtyard? Well, we don't have the proper ventilation to allow our students to conduct dissections in their classrooms. When we've had that, if you've ever cut open a dead cat in your own science class, the smell that comes from that is not something that anybody really wants to go ahead and have to consistently take in every day. Our entire one hallway of science, when we've had those dissections in the hallway, is just not a pleasant smell. So our classrooms actually are moved outside on those days to go ahead and conduct those dissections, weather permitting. If the weather is good, they're able to go outside. But right now, in December, January, in your winter months when the weather's 30 or 40 degrees, our kids aren't going outside. So a lot of those experiments that they would like to be able to do have to be done with modifications in order to be able to make sure that the ventilation is appropriate there. You know, the asbestos was spoken about quite a bit. We had a pipe that broke last year at the high school and water spilled all over the hallway. All of the tile that came up was asbestos tile. I had a group of students that we spoke with today that I told them, you know, when you walk down C hallway, every time you walk and you hear that crackle underneath your feet, that's all asbestos tile too. So the entire building itself is asbestos. You know, that's just some of the main things that you look at the high school, and I know that there's issues at a number of the other schools as well. But even those of you, if you ever did walk in, you look above your head at our ceiling. I've never in my life seen a ceiling that looks like ours, because that used to be our source of heat back in 1960, and up until 2020, prior to COVID, that was our source of heat, where the heat would radiate through the ceiling, and that's how we ended up getting heat. So the ceiling itself is not appealing to look at. And because they are all essentially aluminum tiles, it's not easy to go ahead and take down. It's not easy to put back. So most of the aluminum tiles, due to wear and tear, because they're the original ones to the school, are not, you know, properly secure. So again, there's an abundance of issues. I encourage anybody that has not been in the high school that would like to go ahead and actually see the number of issues firsthand, again, to come to the high school next Wednesday for that tour prior to the in-person forum. But it's not just about, again, the staff members and the students at the high school, right? The high school and all of the schools in the district in general benefit the whole entire community. People move here for our schools, and we want our schools to be proud of. We host visiting teams and visiting families all the time for a number of different events. And when they go in to use our bathrooms for a basketball game or a wrestling match or a volleyball match, a lot of times they come out and they look at an administrator on site and say, this is what Madison is? I thought Madison was better. And we are, and we should be, and we shouldn't stand for this anymore. The condition that our kids and have to use, you know, the bathrooms in are a reason why they don't a lot of times want to go into the bathroom. And instead of using the bathrooms that have been built as part of the school, we'll avoid it and try to go after school or during their phys ed class when they can use the newly updated locker room bathrooms that are more conducive to what they should be using on a daily basis. Again, it's about the community. And it was said before how there's over 300 hours of use by the rec. It's not just the rec and students K through 12. We host the adult school at the high school. We host senior citizen events at the high school. We invite the senior citizens within the community to come to our spring musical. And when they come to our spring musical in March, they're going to be looking at outdated facilities. I would like to go ahead and be able to present something that we could all be proud of, and that people, when they come to our building, say, this is what Madison truly is. Again, these are not just minor inconveniences. These are major infrastructure issues that impact the staff and students who spend most of their day in these buildings.
Thank you, Dave. It's really sobering to hear that. And for anyone who wants a firsthand account, we were really lucky to have a student come and speak to us at a board meeting November 14th, and then some coverage in the paper as well at the Madison Eagle. So I encourage you to read that information about what it's like for someone who has ADA, needs the ADA facilities and doesn't have access to them, and how it's really impacting their learning. Let's see, where are we now? So Anthony, Matt, will you tell us a little bit more about the other projects that are upcoming in this bond referendum beyond that question, that first question?
Sure. Question 2 includes air conditioning in every classroom throughout the district, as well as the common spaces. Any multi-purpose rooms that are lacking air conditioning, or auditoriums. It's kind of already been said that the air conditioning will prevent school closings on particularly hot days, and it also will allow the district to expand summer programs as well, and whether that be for rec or extended school years. Question 2 also includes emergency generators at each of the buildings. Not only do emergency generators provide the benefit of giving you a buffer as far as, if you were to lose power for an extended period of time, say in the winter, you don't have to worry as much about your building freezing up, which could lead to frozen coils and pipe bursts. Not only do you gain that benefit, but the community also gains the benefit of, in the event of a serious storm or hurricane, these buildings could become areas of shelter or refuge. Lastly, question 2 also includes window replacements, specifically at the original part of Central Ave. They are at the end of their life. They're in need of replacement. So that is also in question 2.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to Dave Reschel, our high school principal, to give us some more perspective on what this looks like to really have to teach and work in these environments. So Dave, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. I think our students that we had join us for the tour back in November said it best, and hearing it from their mouths, because they're the ones that have to sit there for 6 or 7 hours a day when it's really hot, really spoke the most to me. We had a number of senior students, 4 of them, that are taking AP Lit, and they were telling the people that were on the tour that on those first couple days of school, and now this has been probably 2 or 3 years in a row now where we've had to call half days due to heat, but on those days, they would say that they would be sitting in their AP Lit class, or whatever class it might be, and sweat would be dripping off of their face onto the paper that they were trying to work on. I think that says it all. There's not a whole lot of other work environments other than schools and other than people that work outside that would allow for working conditions like that. All of you that have a full-time job, part-time job, that work in a building, you are more productive when it is properly heated and cooled. And when those temperatures fluctuate, somebody like me is probably the first one to hear about those issues and complaints. And a lot of times you probably have the ability to go home and finish your work if you're able to go ahead and work remotely in the comfort of your own home. We don't have the ability to go ahead and do that. But on most days when we are in those early school year months or at the end of the school year, I'll walk around because we have temperature thermometers in every single classroom. Our classrooms get up to, on average, probably 87, 88 degrees. That's what it will read on the thermometer. However, that does not include the humidity that is also in the room, which will go ahead and take that real field temperature up to 90 degrees plus. If we want to go ahead and make sure that our kids have the best environment possible, things like that need to go ahead and be addressed. And then our teachers are sitting in their own sweat trying to teach our kids. It's not a conducive environment to go ahead and do that. And a number of times, our teachers, if they need to, will go ahead and move their classrooms to the library where it is air conditioned. And that would be for all of our buildings in general, K through 12. If our teachers have to relocate our kids to go ahead and get them an environment to go ahead and work, they'll go ahead and do that. So, a vote for the referendum is not just for the kids, but it's a vote of confidence in our teachers that we're going to go ahead and provide them the workspaces to go ahead and be as productive and as successful as they can in their classrooms as well. And I know Matt will go ahead and speak to question 3 in a second, but just one thing that I thought was really interesting that came out of a meeting on Tuesday night with the Madison Athletic Foundation. Our girls soccer coach is kind of a history buff, and he did some research. We have the oldest turf in Morris County out of any school in the county. The oldest turf. That needs to be replaced. Our track, that again, not that people should be, but people do during school hours. They use our track to walk, run, even at after school hours practice or at night or whatever it might be, using our track. The track is cracked and we end up having to use filler to go ahead and fill the cracks that are currently in the turf. So there's a number of facility issues that we have there. Again, all facilities that are used by not just the school district, but every single group within this entire community.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm going to jump right in before Matt and just add, as you can imagine, in my household, my kids have heard a lot about the referendum over time. And I remember when we were first having this conversation, we were talking about air conditioning and whether it should be in question 1 or question 2. We were really worried that we were hearing from the community that this was going to be an AC referendum, and it certainly is not. But my youngest son, who's a 5th grader at KRS, looked at me and said, "Mommy, when it's so hot, I can't focus. And it's not because I have ADHD. No one can focus. We're all struggling." So I think it's important. He's in Kings Road. He was in the 2nd floor last year, which gets very hot. Mr. List talked about this when we went on our tour as well, that not only does it get hot, but when you put all those classrooms, all those classes in the same classroom, because it does get hot, that you're impacting that learning environment, right? If you've been into one classroom and you're not used to it, you might find it loud enough. But if you can imagine multiple classes, especially multiple elementary students trying to exist and learn in the same space, remember, these are kids that are often distracted by anything outside the window or anything their friends do, right? To kind of increase that space does impact their learning, as well as the teacher's ability to kind of control that space. So I appreciate sharing that. I wanted to kind of add that story, that this is impacting all of our students and all of our teachers across the district in all of the schools, because all of our schools are facing some of these high temperatures as well. Matt, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about question 3, which I know Mr. Dressel kind of started to touch on.
Sure. So question 3 focuses on expanding a few key areas in the district that are in need of expansion, specifically at Kings Road School and Central Avenue School. At Kings Road, we're proposing expanding upon the multipurpose room. Currently, the space is just simply not large enough to accommodate the population of the building. The student population cannot fit in that space all at one time. This means running assemblies multiple times. It means difficulties with providing lunch, lunch times and gym classes. So we're proposing expanding on that space. Similarly, at Central Avenue School, we are proposing a new multi-purpose room addition to the building, along with 2 classrooms and 2 toilet rooms. Central Avenue has, similar challenges as far as scheduling their lunch periods with gym classes, with a limited size multi-purpose room. So we are proposing an addition of a new space. Not only will this provide an additional space for the students and staff of the school, but it could also provide opportunities for recreational use, and use outside of daily operations. Also in question 3, as Dave mentioned, are some renovations at the high school, specifically the athletic turf field and the track. As Dave said, they're both outside of their useful life, and in need of replacement. And as from a timing perspective, we feel now is an appropriate time to address those issues. Lastly, in question 3 are some renovations to the main gym at the high school. That space is a community space. It's a space, not only that's used for physical education, but for a lot of the sports teams as well. We're proposing new floors, some new lighting, paint wall on the walls and the ceiling, a new scoreboard as well, and some new wall padding. We're also proposing some renovations to the adjacent wrestling room as well. That pretty much sums up all the projects in question 3.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know the Madison Athletic Foundation, we were there last night, no, 2 nights ago. Sorry, I've lost track of days this week. We were talking about the ability to have a whole nother gym here in town and play, and actually 2 more gyms with the expansion at KRS is going to be a huge benefit to our community and to our schools. So I want to thank everyone for sharing that information about the projects and the upcoming bond referendum. One of the things we also need to talk about is the cost. So the total cost of all these projects is estimated at $79.4 million. So if voters approve both questions of the referendum, all the questions of the referendum, Madison Public Schools will receive $21.9 million in state aid. That's something we can only access when we go out for a referendum. So this state aid is money that taxpayers have already paid into the state and can only be brought back again through accessing this through this referendum. So here to tell us more about that, which is obviously an important part of this discussion, is our financial advisor, Robbie Kapora. Sorry, I messed up your name there. And our bond counsel, Tony Salamini.
Thank you. So the projects, as we've discussed, will be broken down into 3 questions. The first for $49.4 million, the second 11.6, and the third 18.3. So the total for all 3 about $79.4 million. And I can't stress enough the fact that the state, only if you have an approved referendum, will give you debt service aid. So the state's going to pay a portion of the principal and interest throughout the 20-year borrowing term. So that's what we've projected as a 20-year borrowing term. And the total is $21.9 million. Both the first and second question are over 30%, and the last one is about 15% state aid. So that is significant because districts could not always get state aid. Districts like Madison could not always get state aid in the past. So when a district holds a referendum, it has to borrow money by selling bonds, pays back over a certain term. We've assumed a 20-year borrowing term, and all 3 questions will have a 20-year term. We would sell the bonds probably at the in the spring or early summer next year. So the tax impact would start to impact the taxes in the 25, 26 fiscal year. We have an average for question number 1 of $40 per month, question 2 about $10 per month more, and question 3 about $19 per month more. So the owner of an average home, and we have an average assessed value home of about $690,000. I'm sure the market value is higher, but remember, assessed values are usually lower than the market value, would pay about $69 a month. Now, we've assumed an interest rate of 4.25%. And, rates have been going up and down this year. They've been trending higher. However, right now, we actually had a 20-year bond sale today, and the rate was a 3.73. We had a bond sale yesterday for just a single A credit rating. Madison's much better than that. The rate was a 3.83. So we try to be conservative when we assume these interest rate projections. So again, we're projecting at 4.25. We're not selling the bonds tomorrow. We have a cushion in there when, where we think the market's going to be. But we do think that it's a conservative number. Now, we will be able to refinance these bonds. We always put a call provision in to be able to refinance the bonds, and we usually put a 7-year call. So that means that the people that buy the bonds know that they're going to have whatever interest rate they bought the bonds at for at least 7 years. But if rates decrease, we have the ability to refinance those bonds. We actually did that for Madison School District on their last existing debt. We did that in 2021. So we always watch the market, and we advise clients to be able to refinance, just like you can refinance a mortgage. So we do that when rates drop. We certainly will advise the district. Actually, if you can achieve a certain savings, the state requires school districts to refinance their debt. So that is something that can be done in the future. But I do want to stress that the rates, these are conservative rates, and we do try to be conservative to have a cushion here. But as of today, rates are lower than the projections that we have now. Again, we had one today that we sold at 3.78, and yesterday at 3.83. I'll be happy to answer questions as they come up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I always like to remind people too that, again, that assessed value, which is what is used to determine the homeowner's property, is different, as you said, than the home market value, especially the market value right now, which we know is extra high in Madison because everyone's trying to get in, partly because of our amazing school system. So just think what will happen if the referendum passes. So again, that's typically much less. Again, the only way for schools to gain this upfront funding and assistance from New Jersey Department of Education is through a voter-approved bond referendum. So school funding, if you've had a chance to come to any of the presentations that Ms. Yazzie, and I've tagged along, but mostly Ms. Yazzie has made at various locations, school funding is very specific and monitored. And so this is one of the only ways. So without this voter approval, the district is not able to complete these updates efficiently with the help of state aid, which is, again, covering about 1/3 of the cost. And we would have to do this covering then 100% of the costs coming from our annual budget. We do need these projects. So that's one of the questions I'm going to preemptively answer. I know it'll come up later. It's like, what happens if it doesn't pass it? If it doesn't pass, we're still going to need to do these projects. So we're either going to come back and ask for another referendum and keep asking until we get it, or we're going to have to try to work some of that into our budget, which is very hard and very limited to do. So I'm going to now hand it over to Tony Salamini to talk a little bit more about that aspect.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And I think one of the points that Robbie made is a really salient point for people to really understand is historically, a district like Madison would not have been eligible to get any aid. However, under the existing law, the aid is determined based on the projects, not on the school district's ability to pay. So you have projects, a lot of your projects are eligible for aid, and therefore you have this opportunity to recoup this state aid money that all of us as residents and homeowners in New Jersey end up paying into. So I think that's really important point, especially for a community like Madison that really doesn't get much state aid for other issues and gets limited federal aid as well. Here's your really one opportunity where you kind of control your own destiny to basically to be able to recoup some of that money that you pay into your New Jersey state property taxes. A couple other just benefits of doing a referendum. As people have indicated, obviously these projects are a priority to the district, and you either have the opportunity to pay for the whole entire cost upfront now, and the current residents would bear the complete burden of paying for the entire cost of these projects, or we can borrow money and spread the cost out over 20 years because we're allowed to spread the cost out over the useful life of these projects. Therefore, all the residents that will be using these facilities and getting the benefits will be able to pay their fair share over 20 years. So we always view it as a referendum is kind of a fair way to spread the cost out over the community and the community members that will be having the benefits of these improved facilities over the useful life of these facilities. One worry that people always have is, well, I do construction on my house and the architect, it's going to tells me that it's going to cost X, but in reality, it costs Y. Public construction and voter-approved referendums for school projects is completely different. The Board of Education, assuming we have an approved referendum, is not allowed to spend $1 more than is authorized by the voters. So, and your architects are aware of this. So your architects have put contingencies in their estimates and put escalation clauses in those estimates. And they know when they bid the projects, they'll bid the projects with alternatives to make sure the projects get done without overexpending the capital project. So, if you're a voter and you vote for this, the school district cannot spend $1 more than you authorized. The last kind of point of contention that people always worry about is, well, who are these bonds going to be sold to? How do you determine the interest rate? Since we're dealing with public funds, assuming we have a successful referendum, the bonds will need to be sold in a competitive bond sale. And the district has to award to the lowest bidder that provides the lowest net interest cost to the district. So the district really has no options of who to award the financing to, except for whoever bids the lowest interest rate. So again, the public will get the best deal possible based on the parameters established in the bond sale, but there's really no discretion on who buys those bonds. They have to be sold to the lowest proposed interest rate that is offered to the school district.
Nice, thank you. I think it's also important to recognize that the bond, the way we've structured it, is that question 1 has to pass in order to get question 2, and then question 1 and 2 must pass in order to get question 3. And the reason we've done that as a district, and obviously in concert and discussion with all the experts we have here tonight, is because some of those projects in question 1 can't actually be done without question 2, or question 2 can't be done without question 1 being done first. So we need the electrical before we can make any updates on the AC and similar. And it also allows the community to have a choice in what they feel like is the right choice for our district and for their personal finances and what have you. So I think that's an important piece for us to keep in mind. This is the end of our presentation portion for tonight's forum. As a reminder, we are recording this forum, so the information can be shared with people who are not able to join us tonight. The link for that recording will be posted on the bond referendum website, hopefully by the end of day tomorrow. And it does look like we do have some participant questions. So if you haven't already answered your question into the chat, now is a really good time to do that. And we're going to go ahead and transfer over to the question portion of this. So our first question is for our architects who can talk about the asbestos abatement plan. And here's this question: How do we make sure that students and staff are safe and do not breathe in asbestos fibers when asbestos containing material is being removed, such as ceiling tiles, floor tiles, pipe insulation, and the like? We all know that the work will last over months and years, and breathing asbestos fibers can cause serious illness, including lung cancer. So I'll hand that over to our architects.
Yeah, I'll handle this. That's a great question. And you're correct that this work is going to take months, and it is going to be done over a few years. Altogether, we're estimating the work to probably take about 3 years, possibly 4. But specifically about the asbestos abatement portion, that work will be limited to the summer months when the building is not occupied. If you're familiar with asbestos abatement, you would know that there are some forms, such as floor tile, that are considered non-friable, that can technically be abated in an occupied building. But that in this setting, we just don't see that as feasible. The reality is we can't have a contractor come in, let's say after hours, and abate a section of floor and bring the students and staff into the building the following day with an unfinished floor. It's just not feasible. So specifically the majority of the work, but specifically the asbestos abatement, will be limited to the summer months when the buildings are not occupied.
I just want to add also that there are codes that we have to follow throughout the entire process: building codes, federal codes, OSHA requirements. And one of the things as far as asbestos removal is we have to constantly monitor the air while asbestos removal is taking place. That gets tested. It gets sent to the building department, and prior to anyone going back into the space, we have to show that the air quality meets the proper standards and safety requirements for all the occupants, whether it be a student or staff or even, custodial staff. We have to make sure that the air quality meets those standards, and that has to be strictly followed.
Thanks, Anthony. And I see there's a follow-up question that's similar. So just keeping us kind of on this track when we get a chance. It says, will there be any air measurements to make sure there's no asbestos fibers in the air in the school buildings before and after school re-entered? I think you kind of addressed that piece of it, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. I will say we have done asbestos projects. In fact, most of our projects are asbestos related. There is a portion of the cost that has to be for asbestos abatement because we have so much in the district. So this is actually already happening in our schools, and we've worked with you, Anthony, you and Matt on this numerous times. So I'm confident in the work, but I want to give you an opportunity to share that with everyone else.
Sure. I mean, that's not taken lightly. I mean, in order to go back into a building where asbestos has been removed, there are extremely stringent requirements. Those are followed. They are worked in conjunction with the building department and the officials in the municipality to make sure that it's a safe environment for anybody, any occupant. Again, a student, a staff, parents, anyone who goes into the building, that the area is safe for to reoccupy. And as Matt said, it'll occur, during times when we can shut the building down.
And just adding to that, for those types of projects, when let's say an asbestos floor is abated, not only does the air quality have to be monitored and suitable for the students and staff to re-enter the building come September, but it has to be suitable for the flooring contractor to come in behind the asbestos contractor to reinstall the floor. So we're opening ourselves up to any sorts of issues, even with contractors, if that isn't abided by. So absolutely, it has to be monitored and tested.
And I think it's important to add too that while we have asbestos in our buildings, many schools do, many locations do, they're not a danger at this moment, right? We would never be putting students into a building where that was a danger. That's obviously something we monitor and take care of. I actually work in a building at my school that also has asbestos tiles. I actually lived in a house that had some asbestos tiles back in the day. So it is something that we want to make sure that while it is a problem and it does need to be taken out of, and it does increase the cost every time we fix a project because we have to put in asbestos abatement, and we want to take this opportunity to remove it as an issue. We are not obviously endangering any of our students currently in the process, even though that material is being used. So I do have another question that I'm going to move to. So the next question says, I'd like to know how would the proposed tax increase physically look on your tax bill? Specifically, would the amount be separated line item from the other taxes, or would it be billed separately or something else altogether? It's going to be billed as part of the school tax, which is how our current bond appears on the tax bill. So for those who don't know, you are currently paying the tail end of our former referendum, and that is wrapped into the school taxes. So those of you who get the quarterly taxes will be able to see it in the school tax. It's not broken out. That's how it's always been. So that's what we expect it to look like. The next question I'm going to hand over to you, Pam, because it's one on timing that we've talked about before, but why wasn't the bond referendum just included on the November 7th vote?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. It's important to note that this has been a process that's a long time in the making. We've been working on the referendum for almost 2 years, and there are a lot of parts, and it's a very sort of regulated process. It's important to understand that there are 5 dates available for school districts to hold elections: January, March, September, December, and during the general election in November. Due to a recent change that happened kind of mid to late summer in the state's timeline, the district's required to notify the county of its intent to hold a bond referendum 60 days prior to the vote date. As part of our process, once we identified all of our projects with our architects and we submitted that to this, it goes to the state for approval. Typically takes the state 3 to 6 months to approve projects. It took our reviewer a year to approve our projects initially. So that took us all the way to July of 2023. So that's why it's been such a long time in the making. Once we got it in July, we needed to go back to the state for some additional questions and clarification, we finally really just kind of had to move forward. And so we made the decision to move forward at our September 26th meeting. The board approved the move forward, and the next possible date for us to hold an election is December because of that 60-day window. Holding a referendum vote in December is really important to us because it allows us to be able to start work in the summer of 2024. If we waited till January, March, the closer we get to the summer, the less likely it is we'll be able to do any work in 2024 during that school summer period. So that's why December 12th.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think that's a question that we've kind of, as you said, gotten a while, a couple of times, and hopefully we're answering it effectively. One of the other questions we had is where I can go to read through the referendum in detail. And that is a great question. And you can read through all the details on the bond referendum at the website, at our website, madisonpublicschools.org/vote. And if there's further questions you have that you don't get answered tonight, again, we do have an email address that you can send us an email, and one of the people who are here will get back to you with that information as well. So that there's lots of opportunities to make sure you have all the information you need so that you can go vote as you feel is appropriate on December 12th for our bond referendum. We do have another question, and I think Mr. Anthony or Matt, you can probably answer this a little bit. There is a question about if there's any safety measures in place specifically. Let me phrase this question again. Sorry, it's a little bit mixed up in my notes here. So if there is similar safety measures that are already in place, or will there be any changes on whether or not there's glass windows in the cafeteria will be enhanced for additional safety and security? So I don't know if the cafeteria glass windows are specifically mentioned in there. I will say that we do have safety measure upgrades and measures that are rolled into the referendum. We've kind of been talking about them relatively vaguely at times for safety reasons. But one of those is in the vestibules, which we did get some funding for. And we're going to be putting in security vestibules in the front of every building. Those are called man traps these days. And they are very needed in the current school environment. We are putting those in every single one of the schools, and that's coming out of some extra money that we were able to retain in our annual budget, which is not the norm. We had a 4% carryover that the state wanted us to have, and then they told us we had to go down to 2%, which gave us a one-time bump of money. And so we were able to use some of that money to prioritize those safety vestibules. So that will be fixed regardless of the referendum passes, but in the referendum, there are further upgrades. So just putting the safety vestibules in as one piece in the beginning of all the spaces, but there are other upgrades as far as technology and other pieces that are going in there. Anthony, I wasn't sure if you had other references to some of the safety pieces. I don't think there's glass specifically in the cafeteria that's being addressed, but.
No, but any glazing, any glass that's done, it's always tempered glass, which is considered safety glazing. Anything in a corridor wall has to be fire rated. Okay, in order to provide the safety in case, God forbid, there's a fire in the building. So, and as you had mentioned, anytime we do a security vestibule, the glazing, we put a film on it that takes a lot longer for an intruder to get through. So it gives the occupants of the building additional time to, go into a shelter in place.
And also say, this obviously is an issue that is close to my heart as a parent, but also as a teacher. We just had a lockdown drill to start us off. First thing we got back from Thanksgiving. One of the things that is in that question 1, 2, that is actually a safety measure is updating all of our doors in the building. And that way in all of our buildings. So that way we know they can all lock. We know they're not going to be bulletproof, right? That's not necessarily the goal, but they are up to kind of modern day safety regulations, considering some of the safety and security issues we have that were not an issue when a lot of the doors were put in place in the 1950s or earlier, depending on the space. So that upgrading of all those doors and making sure we are able to lock down safely and easily. That's not to say we can't do that now, but making sure that is an easier process and a more fluid process is included in that question 1. So there are safety upgrades that are throughout the referendum that are really important. So another question for our architects, this is one we get all the time, is that can the building additions such as the gym at Cass and maybe even the high school roof that is in that question when replacing it, can they be made solar ready? So we've got a lot of questions about solar and we've been talking about it from day one. It was one of the first questions I asked when we first saw those blueprints, but Anthony or Matt, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Sure. The short answer is yes. The building additions will be made to be solar ready, both structurally and the type of roofing material that will be installed will be ready for solar. We typically would never recommend putting solar panels on an older roof, really anything older than a few years old, because when the time comes to replace the roof, you need to take down all the solar panels, and depending on the structure of whether it's a PPA or even if you own them outright, now you're losing revenue from lost time of the panels. So we would never recommend putting them on an older roof or even a foam style roof, which is a lot of the high school roof right now. But once if the referendum were to be approved, the high school would be suitable for solar, as would be the additions. Currently, there is not, solar is not specifically included in the referendum, but that is something that would be possible down the road.
Thanks. I think it's important for the public to know, again, as I've said, this is a question we've gotten multiple times. So I've been on operations committee, which is kind of overseeing this process for the past 2 years. And certainly was one of the first questions many of us on the operations committee asked when we first saw the blueprints a couple of years ago. It's also something we've brought in experts from Sustainable Madison and other areas to talk to us about. I know there's a lot of initiatives with the town as well with solar. And so we've been talking to them in our shared services. It is important for us to build sustainably. It's just really hard to say we need to put in solar when our kids are in rooms that have asbestos, or as Mr. Dressel said, they can't actually have lab in their lab rooms because there's not ventilation, right? So one of the things that's really important, we've always said when we discuss this, is we got to bring our buildings up to base standard levels and kind of reset the clock, so then we can have these conversations about possible partnerships and opportunities for including those kind of sustainable measures. It is also important to recognize that upgrading all the lights is a sustainability issue, and upgrading all the heating and air conditioning is really important. Right now, it's either on or off. And Mr. Eshman talks about this all the time. He actually will tell you that heating is the biggest issue, which was in our question 1. But by upgrading all these facilities, by upgrading the electrical, we're able to turn on and off specific places. If they're being used, we're able to conserve that energy. We're able to reinforce kind of some of our energy use and cut it down. And then again, all the lights we're using throughout the district are somewhat mixed. And so not only do they impact learning, we actually went into a classroom during the KRS tour. I wasn't there, but I was hearing about it. It's supposed to be like 50 on whatever scale it is. And it was 30 to 40 in some of the classrooms. I can say as a teacher and someone who has kids and works with kids who have sensory issues specifically, but just any kids, having that kind of mixed lighting or having that kind of back in the day fluorescent lightings that we maybe all remember when we grew up is not what our current classrooms need, especially considering we're on screens and what have you. So there are both sustainable issues that are being addressed by upgrading lighting, as well as teaching and learning issues. So this is something we have talked about, and we are partnering with other people in town to make sure we're doing the best we can with what we have and being fiscally responsible what we're asking for, but also thinking ahead and looking forward so that we can add to this. We have another question for our architects before we move on to a series of questions about voting, which a bunch of people have asked. But assuming voters do approve everything, when would we see the proposed renovations completed, or when would you expect those to be completed?
So as Pam stated earlier, one reason why we're coming to the voters in December is so that we can get started in the first summer, the summer 2024. The majority of the work will be done over the summers. One exception would be if question 3 were to be approved, the additions would require year-round construction. But we foresee the construction taking about approximately 3 years. It could bleed into a 4th year, but as I said, the majority of it, if not almost all of it, happening during the summer months, within 3 to possibly 4 years.
Anthony, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of it may occur throughout the school year. If it does, there would be no interruption of the academics. As everyone knows, we did a major HVAC project at the high school, and one of the reasons that we had to do it was because you had no ventilation in the existing building, and the children were wearing and the staff were wearing jackets in the middle of the school year because we had to open up windows in order to get ventilation due to COVID. So as we did there, we did it on second shift, so it did not interrupt the academics of the students and staff. If we have to do that, we're prepared to do that. We've shown the Madison community that it could be done, and we may be doing that again in the future.
And I think that's one of the things that I've been really impressed with throughout this project, is how much discussion and conversation you both have had with John Eschman, who's our buildings and grounds director, and who really understands our buildings inside out and backwards, and just having conversations of creative solutions for thinking about what we can get done, when we can get it done, how fast we can get these projects through with the least amount of interruption. And having those conversations from the beginning when we were deciding what projects to pick was a really important piece of this. And I said, we have an excellent staff here in Madison that has been holding things together for years, and probably ways that even I, who have had a lot of exposure to this at this point, don't fully comprehend. But the fact that you have worked so well with our district and are so familiar with our district as well is a kind of real benefit. Dave, I see you popped on, so I didn't know if you had anything else to add before we move on to voting questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, the Jim Vacaros, as they mentioned, they were a part of the ventilation system that was put into the high school. And I have complete confidence based on the work that was done for that ventilation project. Their ability to communicate, their ability to work with the schools in order to get a project done, and get a project done. For the most part, that project finished on time as well. And every single set of expectations that were communicated to me, they did a really good job meeting. So I know a project this size can be pretty daunting, but one of the great things about them is they include not only John Eschman, but the building principals in those meetings to ensure that education does not stop. And I have no concern that the education and instruction during the time that these projects would take place, we would continue doing everything that we need to do during the day in those buildings. And, they're just really good and excellent people to work with. So I just wanted to make sure that that was known.
In fact, they're so good, I believe the YMCA is using them for some work as well, because of their exposure to having how well it's worked here. I really appreciate that. Matt, I don't want to cut you off if you wanted to add something besides thanking Dave for being so nice to you. That was it. Okay. I think it's been really helpful to have that open communication. I think it's really important to recognize that probably more learning will be impacted if we are not doing these projects at all, right? We've already talked about the increase in heat, and we've already seen how we have had to close school in September, both the past 2 years, and some more issues. We have one more question, I think, coming in for our architects before we move over to voting. So we are talking about, is it already decided what architect contractor will do the work? And will there be tender? I don't know what that part of the question means, but is it already decided which architect contractor will do the work? I think you can speak to the contractor side of things.
Right. So what happens in this process when the referendum's approved, we start to put together bid documents. And because it's public funds, as I think Mr. Salamini has stated earlier, it has to go out for public bid, similar to your bond sale. So we put together the documents, they go out to bid. We have to award it to the lowest responsible bidder. So it has not been decided who's going to do this work. It will not be one contractor. It's not like we're building one new school or one big addition for this entire referendum amount that's being, asked for. It's a lot of, different projects. So all those projects will be put out to bid separately, and whichever contractor is the lowest bidder is, again, responsible bidder. They have to be pre-qualified by the state of New Jersey. You just can't walk off the street and bid the project unless you have all the pre-qualifications required by the state of New Jersey, and that contractor is then awarded. So there'll be a mechanical contractor, there'll be a flooring contractor, a light electrical contractor to do the lighting and the electrical service. There'll be a roofing contractor. And by splitting it up that way also saves the district money. Okay, by going directly to a roofing contractor and you don't pay the overhead of a general contractor, will save the district money. So that's the way we've been doing it for years. That's the way we did the HVAC project at the high school, and we'll continue to do that, again, to allow Madison to get the best bang for their buck.
Anthony, could you just add a little bit about your experience in the state and the breadth of districts that you've worked with?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, my father started the business 46 years ago. I've been with him for 36 years. Matt's now with me like 9 years. And we've worked, I probably worked in 70 different school districts, maybe more, throughout the state. We're currently working in about 20 school districts. Again, it's so important to us that the students, the staff are the most important thing. Safety is obviously paramount throughout the entire process. And, we make sure that the academics don't suffer during the construction process. We have meetings with the contractors. As Mr. Dreschel had said, we include the building principal, the buildings and grounds director, and everybody is notified on timelines, and we hold the contractor responsible for the timeline. In the case of the HVAC project at the high school, we had milestone marks that the contractor had to match or to meet throughout the project. We put in liquidated damage clauses. So if the contractor does not meet those dates, they start paying a liquidated damage clause in the neighborhood of $1,000 a day. So, and we hold the contractor's feet to the fire. That's what we're here for. That's the way we've run this. I've been doing it for 36 years, and that's just our way of working with schools. We treat the schools' money like it's our own money. We do everything we can to, save the district money. Again, as I mentioned just before, we go out to a roofing contractor for the roof. We go out to an HVAC contractor for the HVAC. And again, we follow the construction. We have job meetings. We make sure the project is completed and closed out. And that's the way we run it.
I would just add, you are not new to our district. The HVAC project was not the first one. You were an integral part of our ability to bring full day kindergarten to our district in a absolutely lightning fast period of time that probably most districts don't experience. And you're also working on our security vestibules as well. So I just want to point out that you are not new to us. So, and will also say, Sarah and I, along with Carmen Vasto, who are on the referendum committee, I mean, I think I speak for all three of us to say, like, you've been nothing but responsive. Every tour that we're doing, you've been at. Every question we have, you've answered. And it's been a really great partnership thus far.
Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate that. And yes, the district came to us, I think in May, and said they wanted full day kindergarten in September. And fortunately, we are on a first name basis with the Department of Education in Trenton. Again, that's what 36 years does for you. We take a lot of pride in building a relationship. We did the first long-range facility plan for the district back in 2000 when it was first started. So we've been involved with the district for many years.
Thank you so much. We are going to get to the voting questions, I promise, but we just had a question that came in for Robbie, and I want to make sure it doesn't get lost. So we have a question. It says, if the interest rate on the bond issue is less than 4.25%, will our future tax assessment be less than the proposed 69 per month for the average home?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, it will. The day that we sell the bonds, we'll be locked into the interest rate for 20 years, and we will reevaluate and give the district the updated tax impact projections. Again, these are just projections. Rates were trending up. Now they're trending down, but we do, again, have a cushion in there. So we have, at least right now, almost a half of a percentage point cushion in there. So we will revise the tax impact. Nothing is set in stone until the day we sell the bonds.
Nice. And can you just talk, this is one of the things that I thought was really interesting when we've been talking throughout this process. There's a lot of like words and commotion, and that we're at we are at historically low rates, and now we're historically high rates, and inflation is bad, and it's all over. I think there's a lot of kind of conversation about that. And one of the things you struck me is talking about how we're actually at historically average rates. Could you just talk a little bit about that history? I think there's some concern in the community kind of about where we are and why we're not waiting.
Yes. We are really, rates are still very good. When COVID happened, everything dropped, everything was crazy, and our rates dropped to probably somewhere in the high twos. We were able to sell 20-year bonds. That was an anomaly, and it was short-lived. But I'm trying to think of, as an example, we were probably in 2013 selling bonds that were probably in the high 4s, 5%. So they dropped, they came back up again, but they're still not as high as they were 10 or 12 years ago. And as I mentioned, that we refinanced bonds for Madison, I think they were issued in 2012, and we refinanced them. So they're still very good rates in the scheme of things. These are tax exempt rates. They're not rates that you can go out and get a mortgage at. As people hear the headlines about mortgages being 8%, although I saw tonight that they've dropped today for the 5th week in a row. So that's important to point out too. These are tax exempt rates. Public entities get tax exempt rates, and they're lower than the taxable rates that we all pay for our mortgages. So I think that's an important point too. The other thing to keep in mind that districts haven't experienced for a long time is that everyone sees increases in certificates of deposit, savings account rates now. Once these bonds are sold, the district is going to be able to accrue a significant amount on the investment of the bond proceeds. Now they're going to get spent over 3 years, as the architects have been talking about. So those proceeds are going to get invested, and they're going to get generate interest earnings for the school district. We have not, again, we're trying to be conservative. We have not included that as an offset to the tax impact, but in fact, there is going to be a significant amount of interest earnings, again, because of the interest rate environment. You're going to, today, you could invest those proceeds to earn more than your borrowing rate, although the federal government doesn't let you do that. You have to rebate back the difference. But to be conservative, you are going to earn probably at least your borrowing rate, and that's going to help to offset, but we haven't really included that. So it's something to keep in mind too.
Thank you so much. I think that's really helpful. All right, Pam, we're finally on to you to talk about some of these voting questions, and then we will still have time at the end. So if you have other questions that come up as you're listening, please do not hesitate to drop them into the Zoom chat, as we will update and make sure they're added as we go.
Okay, great. So I'll just kind of run them down. So the first question is, where can I vote on the 12th? So you're going to vote at your normal polling place that you vote in general elections. So wherever you voted at the beginning of November is the same place you're going to vote for this election. Just bear in mind, if you are in a district or in one of the smaller districts like mine, where you typically voted at the library is under renovations, you're probably now voting at Hartley Dodge. If you're not sure, you can check your sample ballot. So you'll get a sample ballot in the same way we do for a regular election. It hasn't come out yet. Or you can go to our madisonpublicsschools.org/vote and check the voter information page. There's a whole page that talks about everything you need to know about voting, including where to check, whether you're registered, all that kind of stuff. Next question is, who can vote in the December 12th bond referendum? The short answer is anyone who's registered to vote in Madison. So if you're registered to vote in a regular election, you're registered to vote. I had the privilege of talking to some high school kids today who are newly 18, newly voters. So that's very exciting. I've also, though, answered questions in our voting, in our vote mailbox for individuals who live in our community and send our kids to our school, but maybe are here on a visa from another country. Unfortunately, they are not eligible to vote. So it's just, if you are registered to vote in a regular election, you're registered to vote for this election as well. The next question is, what if I arrive at a polling location on December 12th and I'm turned away? So if you show up at a polling station on voting day and you're told your ballot was mailed to you, because we all have the option to select that every ballot gets mailed to us, and that would include this ballot too, or that you're not able to vote, you just ask the poll worker for a provisional ballot, and that ensures your ballot gets counted once all of the mail-in ballots are double checked and processed. So if you, for some reason, get turned away, you're just asking for a provisional ballot. Next question, how can I vote by mail in this special election? So there is no early voting in this election, and I've gotten a lot of questions in the mailbox about that as well. A lot of people traveling for work or whatever on December 12th concerned about this. You can check your vote by mail status by contacting the Morris County Board of Elections. If you're not signed up for vote by mail, the deadline, the absolute last day to request it, is next Tuesday, December 5th. And then you'll get a vote by mail ballot. I just got one today for my college age kid. This is what it looks like. He sent this in on November 16th and it arrived today. So if you're sending it, the last day is the 5th, they're going to turn it around to you pretty quickly, because you have to get it back in the mail, postmarked or handed into the county on December 12th. I think we just got, did we just get another one, or is,
why don't you
so-
finish the one on the senior citizens?
Yeah, I will.
Taxes,
I will.
and I'll actually circle back to that one.
Yeah, this is a really important one. I think it's really interesting and important for our senior citizens to know. So how can senior citizens maintain their property taxes? So the bond referendum will result in a tax increase to cover the cost of the proposed project if all three questions pass. The state of New Jersey offers a property tax reimbursement program known as the Senior Freeze. And it protects some senior citizens and people with disabilities for having to pay higher taxes on their homes. So that's not only true for this referendum, but for other taxes as well. For more information, including to understand whether or not you qualify for that program, it's on the state's Senior Freeze webpage. Seniors benefit from the quality of the schools in the community, but you obviously don't always have to pay those higher taxes. So by all means, if you think you might qualify for this, please go to the state of New Jersey Senior Freeze webpage. You can Google that. All
Thank you
right,
so much.
Sarah, I think I'm back to you.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that came in, it said, I'm sold on the referendum. We're happy you are, but would like to understand the rationale for not including any updates to TJS or Tory J school in question 3. It seems all the schools will receive updates except for Tory J. And so I think it's important to understand that all the schools are receiving updates. And I'll let Anthony and Matt handle some of this too. Tory J is actually our youngest school, built around, I guess, Pam, you know the date probably off the head. I know Nixon was president. That's what I remember from our thing.
1970.
So that's one of the pieces, is actually one of our newer buildings. And so that's a piece of why it seems like Tory J is getting less. Although I will say, and this is one of Pam's favorite things to talk about, if you've seen any of our presentations, we have this lovely PA system from Tory J that looks like, well, I mean, I think it looks like someone was listening to FDR's fireside chats on it. It's very old. So that's one of the things that we'll be getting. So we'll be getting some updates. I don't know if Anthony, you and Matt want to add anything to that specific piece. One of the things about question 3 too is that Tory J does have a space where their whole community can meet. And that's not the case for both CAS and for Kings Road. So those two schools cannot get everyone into their multi-purpose spaces. So we can't ever have, I'm a KRS parent, so we can't ever have everyone meeting in one location. We can't have a full community event. When we have our winter concert, it has to be split up. if you pay for the PTO dues, you are paying for more because we have to run every assembly that is brought to us by our amazing PTOs, and our MEF grants have to run twice in both of those schools because we can't get all of our students into those spaces, much less all of our parents into those spaces. So one of the reasons for that, those two additions, is because it's literally about who is being able to be housed. And also those are the two spaces where our lunch is occurring in both of those schools. And so that turnover of lunch, first of all, there's multiple lunch periods that are being turned over. But when you have those lunch periods happening in that space, you can't be using that space for learning. So we can't use that space for gym classes. We can't use that space for PE or any of the other multiple reasons we might use it as multi-purpose spaces. So for example, at CAS, because they're getting a full new gym, it means that gym classes will be able to happen while other groups are eating. I didn't know this until I was talking to a parent the other day, but apparently currently at CAS, we have 2 gym classes joining together, which means you have 2 teachers, but you have like 50 kids essentially in one space. And I'm a high school teacher, so elementary scares me just a little bit, but the idea of 50 kids specifically in gym class in and of itself is an issue, but that's because they don't have enough access to that multi-purpose space during the day. So that's one of the reasons we have those pieces. Tori J will also get a lot of updates in question 1. So there's upgrades to the entryway security, such as cameras and additional card readers, protective window film, some of those security pieces that we've talked about. They're going to get classroom heating and ventilation upgrades, which includes the new unit ventilators so that we don't have that last minute fix that we need to before Tori J's amazing kids sing at their winter concert. They're also going to have some automatic temperature control systems to improve efficiency and reliability, electrical service and panel updates to support those enhancements. Their outdated fire alarm system will be updated. That public address, like the PA system, which I just talked about, will be updated. And their building and exit signs will be replaced to increase kind of security and communication and offer just more peace of mind for those who are in that school. There's also interior renovations to areas that haven't received attention in years, such as bathrooms and ceilings, lighting, flooring, classrooms, and storage. That's happening across the district, but that's happening at Tori J as well. In all of our, as I said, all of 5 of our schools. And then following all state guidelines, specific building components that are made with asbestos, will be upgraded as well. And I will say there's a little bit less, I believe, and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, at Tori J, just because of when it was built, but we're still making sure that all of that is out there. So all 3 schools are getting upgrades. I didn't know if I missed anything, if anyone else wanted to add specifically to that question.
Sarah, I think you pretty much hit it right on the head. As far as question 3 goes, there are some minor exterior repairs and upgrades being done at Tori J, similarly to the other buildings as well, albeit not an expansion or an addition, but there's some minor work being done in question 3. But like I said, I think Sarah really couldn't have said it better. Most of the work being done at Tori J is being done in the first 2 questions. It's a lot of the safety and security, the heating issues, the interior upgrades and renovations, and as far as space needs, the needs were greater at the other 2 buildings, and we didn't want to just run wild, and run the referendum up, unnecessarily as high as we could. So we really wanted the need to drive the referendum rather than the want. But I do believe there is a walkthrough at Tori J this Saturday at noon. So that is a good opportunity to see the work that is going to be done if the referendum is approved.
Thank you so much. And I do think it's important, you referred to this, and it's one of the things we've talked about, that this is a district-wide referendum. And we're really trying as much as possible, not necessarily look at equality where everyone's getting the same thing, but look at equity and look at what our buildings really need. So for those of you who don't know, our Madison Junior School is celebrating 100 years, which is amazing this year, but obviously you can imagine a 100-year-old building, and a building built in 1970 might need some different upgrades and elements. Our oldest school is actually Central, and the beginning part of it was actually built in 1910, which was the favorite fact of students during our during our discussions with some of them on Bottle Hill Day, when we asked what else was built in 1910, and they recognized that it was the Titanic, and they've all heard about the Titanic, and they were like, no way, our school's so old. So we are really aware of that kind of equity, making sure that everyone has equitable access, even if it doesn't necessarily seem equal. And I know as a Kings Road parent, as an elementary school parent, that sometimes we feel pitted against each other in the elementary level, just because there are 3 schools, but it is something we're very cognizant about, and that we've been working very hard on to make sure that all of our students are getting some fair access. So we do have another question here. That follow up, which I kind of talked to and alluded to before, but it's what happens if the referendum does not pass. So if the referendum is not approved by voters, the district will still face the same infrastructure issues and facility needs. Those are not going away, but we're going to have to address them without the advantage of that $21.9 million in state aid and upfront funding, which is so critical to this process and one of the reasons we go out. Projects will need to be spread out over many years to fit the costs and repairs of improvements within the regular budget. And quite honestly, they just can't really be fit within the regular budget. So Pam, you have the numbers on this for the high school roof a little bit, but you always talk about how it's about $5 million. We're getting about three and change from state aid. If we have to pay all 100% of that $5 million, as Dave referred to, the roof obviously needs to be fixed. If we're doing it, we don't ever have kind of $5 million in one of our budgets, so we'd have to do it piecemeal. And I don't know if anyone's ever fixed a roof at their house before, but as someone who has lived in a house that has been fixed piecemeal on their roof, it's not the most efficient process. So that's one of the pieces that is there that we will have to do that. Again, that regular budget itself is also funded through our local taxes. So the district has to stay within a mandated cap, a 2% cap for our annual tax revenue. We can't raise it any more than that. So even if we need that $5 million roof or the 16 million in change for our ceilings and floors abatement, we can't raise your taxes more than that 2%. So that leaves the board with the choice of funding these repairs and maintenance at the expense of our instructional programs, which we certainly don't want to do, or going back to voters and asking to approve a budget increase beyond the 2% cap, which is going to be cost increases each time the projects are delayed or reorganized. So we will basically coming back to you is the only way we can really do this if it doesn't pass. We're going to need these repairs and upgrades regardless. So that's one of the pieces. I didn't know, Pam, if you wanted to add to anything about that question, because I know we've talked about it a lot. I covered some of it, but there might be some state funding pieces you want to add.
No, I think you covered it. And I see there's one more question about the vote if you want me to cover that.
Yeah, why don't you get that one? Thanks.
Okay, great. So we just got a question about, is there a minimum amount of people that need to vote to make the referendum count? Is a single majority sufficient? I.e., if more than 50% vote yes for question 1, things under question 1 will be done. 1 vote. We need 1 more yes vote than no vote. That's all we need. So if 3 people vote and 2 vote yes and 1 vote no, we move forward. So it's really, really critical that everyone votes. I will tell you, having been working on this for a long time, I've heard a lot of people say to me, oh, it's going to pass. And that's what I worry about. I worry about the people who assume that it'll pass and don't vote. We've seen it happen in our general elections, or we've seen very slim margins. A few years back, the difference on a school board seat was 6 votes. So I really encourage everybody to go out and vote. Whether you're 18 years old and voting for the first time, whether you're away at college, whether you're a retiree, you're a parent, please get out and vote. It's our civic responsibility and it's a privilege.
Thanks. And I will echo that. Obviously, I have lots of feels about this. As I tell my students, I am a history teacher, so voting is super important to me. Even when I sometimes don't like the outcomes of elections, I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to have their voice heard. And I think that's one of the things that I'm proudest about this board, is that we, as I said earlier in our November 14th discussion, the board meeting, we're not shying away from going out to the voters. We want to put this in front of our community so you have a chance to weigh in and have your voices heard, because this is your tax money. I mean, my tax money is a voter too, but your tax money. We really want to give you as much information as possible so you can make the best choice possible. But we're not waiting to pass the buck on to the next board or to our new superintendent or to the next generation. This is something that we really need to at least have the opportunity as a community to decide. And I think, Dr. Roberta, you speak well about this, about kind of when the junior school was built. At the time it was our high school. there was obviously a commitment from this community to invest in our schools. And I think time and time again, we've seen that. We've invested in our instructional programs by adding STEM labs, updating our locker rooms, right? Like, we support education in Madison in so many ways. Our Madison Education Foundation, our PTOs, all these different groups that work with us are testaments to that. And this is our chance as a community to also kind of demonstrate where our values are, and then hopefully be able to show that where their values are. So we don't have people coming from other towns and talking about what Madison looks like and Madison could be. Pam, you said you talked to the kids today and they were kind of surprised how bad it was, which is a shame. I think you kind of get used to it. And I think people are somewhat surprised of once you walk in the buildings to see what's really going on. So we encourage you to make sure that that you come to the various walkthroughs and that you get a chance to get as much information as possible. I don't think we have any other questions. I just want to double check if anyone has anything else. If it doesn't pop up in there. Yes, there is one. So will the recording be available on the website? Yes, it will. We're hoping it'll be up by tomorrow. Obviously, we have some tech things to get it working. Again, that website is madisonpublicschools.org/vote. And we thank you as well. Thank you for us. So we want to thank all of our presenters who are coming out tonight and sharing their experiences on the Madison School Bond Referendum. If you have questions, again, if you didn't get them answered tonight or you think of them after the fact, which inevitably happens to me, you're able to email us we'll get back to you with a response. You can also visit our website, as I said, madisonpublicschools.org/vote for more information, as well as frequently asked questions, which we do update, and we actually will be in the process of updating based on tonight's questions, so that it's as fresh as possible with as many questions as well. The recording will also be posted on that website. So I'm going to hand it off to Pam, who has led us in this effort for the past year and a half both as our vice president last year and our operations chairman this year, to give us kind of a final send off.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to reiterate that I'm proud to live in this community, and I'm excited about the projects that could give our kids healthier, safer, more inviting schools that match our incredible learning environment that our staff and our administration work to provide every day. I just, imagine the benefit to our community that this investment would bring. An investment in the schools is really an investment in our community, and it brings value to all of us. We all use our schools. So thanks for joining us and learning more about the referendum. And if you want to join us again next week, we'll be doing a live session. And also, as Sarah mentioned, we have a couple of opportunities to visit Torrey J on Saturday and also get a walkthrough of the high school just before our live session next week.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank everyone who came out tonight and spending a night with us. I know there's a lot going on in our community. And thank you for joining us and learning about the bond referendum. Again, thank you again to our presenters for spending their time doing this and sharing their insights. And we hope everyone has a good night. So thank you.